Thanks for tuning in to college football coverage on the Our Lads Football Network as we talk Conference USA football. And we're going to do that with Eric Henry. He is the managing editor at UnderdogDynasty.com. And he also is the host of a CUSA podcast over at SBNation.com. Eric, good to talk to you finally. It's not easy to find someone that has a lot of knowledge about Conference USA football. So I hope this is the beginning of many talks that we can have over the years.
First off, Greg, appreciate you having me on. It's a pleasure to be on. And you are correct. CUSA, we like to call it, kind of some of the group chats between some of the other Conference USA beat writers and, those of us who are in the know. CUSA is a labor of love. It's definitely a situation where, it is a unique and kind of specified knowledge base, but a lot of good football played at Conference USA. And as a graduate of a group of five school myself, graduate at UCF, I always have love for the quote unquote smaller leagues.
And also you cover Florida International. I noticed it says that you're a beat writer for FIU. Is that like the one specific team in Conference USA you follow the most?
Yeah. So essentially it kind of started out where originally I was doing general CUSA stuff. About midway through my first year with SB Nation, Underdog Dynasty, transitioned into FIU. So FIU, I would consider my prime beat. But then, of course, hosting the podcast, you're covering the entire league. And then at the end of the year, I'll always cover a handful of Conference USA bowl games as well. So it's FIU beat writer / general CUSA. Okay. That's the easiest way to sum it up.
Do you live in South Florida?
Yes, I do.
All right. Well, let's get it started. And we're going to go alphabetically, starting in the East. And we're going to start with Charlotte. So Charlotte, and again, it's a 14-team conference. So you have 7 in the East and 7 in the West. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Outside of last year, I saw Old Dominion opt out. It was a 13-team league last year, but it is 14-team league normally.
Yes. Right. Old Dominion did not play last year. So Charlotte, just taking a look at them, not sure this is going to be like a big year for Charlotte, but they do have talent. A lot's going to depend on Chris Reynolds, the quarterback, isn't it?
No doubt about it. And first off, everything starts with their head coach, Will Healy. He's one of the youngest coaches in FBS. And if you ever had a chance to interact with him, we just recently had him on the CUSA podcast, full of energy. He's the guy who, post-game, they call their locker room Club Lit.
Yeah.
Because if they win, he turns into a club and they've got music blaring and the whole nine. So it really starts with Will Healy, again, 36, 37 years old, if memory serves me correct. And then to your quarterback, Chris Reynolds. The thing with him is this, and for those of your listeners who may not know his story, former walk-on, was a 7th-string quarterback, local kid from, that area, and just gritted his way to being the starter in 2019. They actually brought in guys to beat him out each year. Since Will Healy's been there, brought in Brett Keane from South Florida, and now this year, James Foster from Texas A&M, the more traditional 6'3", 6'4 quarterback, Reynolds of 5'10", $195. But if he's healthy, he's one of the best dual-threat options amongst the G5 ranks. And then when you go from quarterback, they have one of the top G5 receivers in Miami native Vic Tucker. Vic Tucker is a guy who, if he were playing at a Power 5 or maybe a situation where they had an offense where they threw the ball a little bit more, he'd be a 1,000-yard receiver perennially, but is known as one of the best route runners in Conference USA. The biggest question mark, Greg, is going to be defensively. Right. They lost Ben DeLuca to the San Diego Chargers, lost a lot of veteran talent. The guy to keep an eye on is Tyler Murray. He's a transfer from Troy. I believe was an all-conference player at Troy. Had 30-something tackles in the 5 or 6 games they played last year, but he's a guy who's really going to lead that defense. But it's a young defense, so let's see what happens there.
Yeah, and last year, it was just one of those years where you go, it was COVID, let's forget it. Because if you look at it, you mentioned Reynolds' injury situation, and he played, but he was banged up. And all you have to do is look at the stats. He had 767 rushing yards in 2019 when he was healthy. He had 36 rushing yards last year. So you just can't take that aspect of his game away and expect that they're going to be as successful. So it's all about keeping him healthy. Does Victor Tucker have what it takes to be a pro?
Short answer, yes. And the reason I say that is because he's one of the top route runners. Vic Tucker is a technician. And for today's NFL, that smaller receiver, Vic's about 6 foot, $180, who can operate in the slot, he'd be an excellent fit.
Let's talk about FAU now before we get into FIU. Year 2 for Willie Taggart. They were off to a 5-1 start last year. lost their last 3. But they had 7 games canceled or postponed. So again, it was just all crazy. You just couldn't really evaluate them properly. But the well, look, they do have 20 returning starters, so that's huge. And they usually have some of the more talented players in the conference, but it's all about the quarterback position. And Perry is in there, the transfer from Miami. Tronti, he wasn't necessarily on top of his game last year to think that he's going to win this job. So, but he could. I mean, Perry wasn't exactly, a top quarterback at Miami, which is the reason why he transferred.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? Now, I don't want to sound as if I'm being overly critical on Nick Tronti. However, we've kind of seen what his ceiling is. He's a guy who transferred from Indiana, local Floridian kid. And what you saw last year kind of is who he is, right? He's not going to take the offense to the next level. Now, while you're correct, N'Kosi Perry had certainly an up-and-down career at UM, you at least see the potential that he can get more out of that offense than Nick Tronti can. And just kind of give you a quick spiel on the Owls overall, that was a team that was a year ahead of schedule last year, especially defensively. Had a very young defense, but they all performed well above the expectations. Guys like Chase Lassiter, Amon Ross, Zion Gilbert, they get Achilles Leroy back, who missed all of last year due to academic issues. But 2019, he was a runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year. And that's in addition to a loaded linebacking core that they have already. So defensively, they're going to be set. At running back, they have Malcolm Davidson. They have Larry McCammon. They have the USF transfer Johnny Ford. So really, just to kind of hammer home your point, if they get above average quarterback play, the road's there for them to win the East.
And again, that's why you're always intrigued by the quarterbacks that leave Power 5 programs to go to Group of 5 programs, because you just would naturally think that it's just a better. I mean, we're not talking about quarterbacks that have aspirations of becoming pros, just quarterbacks that. Now, this is their college career. Then they're going to move on and graduate and have, a job like the rest of us. But it's a great opportunity for them to come a little bit lower down in competition, and that should help out Perry.
Oh, listen, no doubt about it. And the thing with N'Kosi, now, believe it or not, again, I feel like it's going to be a reoccurring theme here. I had a chance to see N'Kosi's real first extended playing time against an FBS team in 2018. That was against FIU. FIU that played that game at the Dolphin Stadium. And N'Kosi, again, when you look at the physical tools, it's all there, but he was competing against Malik Rozier, and then they bring in a De'Aaron King. I don't even want to say it's necessarily that he couldn't play as much as there were a lot of circumstances around him. Of course, he had kind of a minor, I don't even want to call it a off-the-field issue, just kind of like a minor thing that a 20-year-old does. It was a deal on social media, made some dumb comments. Just the maturing process, right? So being still in Florida, he's no Ocala native, but on a smaller scale at FAU could be what you need to get the most out of him.
Yeah, I remember when he first started to play, there was a lot of excitement down in Miami about Perry. And it just never materialized, but you did see spurts of his talent. So, again, maybe the drop down in competition will be perfect for him. Okay, now we talk about the team you follow, FIU, and it was a season to forget last year, no question about it. But again, it's just one of those years. It's going to happen. New coordinators. So what was the reasoning there for Butch to go out and bring in some new offense and defensive coordinators?
Well, okay, I'll give you the company line on one, and I'll give you the actual reason, right? So when you look at the offensive coordinator, former offensive coordinator Rich Scrosky is someone who's beloved by not only his former quarterbacks, and we talk about one in James Morgan, but Alex Magoo. These are two guys who FIU sent back-to-back quarterbacks to the NFL. Yeah. Remember, we're not talking about Michigan, Ohio State. We're talking about Florida International. So that's a hell of an accomplishment, and those guys swear by Rich Scrosky. They say, without him, we wouldn't have been prepared to go to the combine and get on the board and be NFL quarterbacks. Butch Davis says that there was a need for the offense to evolve. Here's where kind of the truth lies in the middle, right? And I got a chance to know Coach Scrosky from my time covering FIU. He runs a very specific offense. He's be the first to say, look, I'm not looking to run 1,000 plays. I'm looking to rep 100 plays really well against the looks that we're going to see out there on game day. And that worked well when you have a Magoo, a Morgan at quarterback. But when you don't necessarily have that established name, maybe that hurt them a little bit in terms of generating offense, specifically in the passing game, in which they averaged, I think it was, what's the number, 125 5.4 yards or something to that effect per game. They had 3 games, Greg, under 90 yards passing. So that's kind of the deal there. Then quickly on the defensive coordinator, Everett Withers was the guy that Butch Davis wanted from 2018. Everett Withers coached with him at North Carolina, was the defensive coordinator there. He had agreed in principle to take the job after Brent Guy's retirement after the 2018 season. However, last minute, New York Giants offered Everett Withers a job as defensive backs coach. He takes that role. Butch and Everett still have a long-standing relationship, so Coach Davis got it. Get him around this time around. So I think that'll cause an improvement on the defense. And quick note, Greg, not just new coordinators, 7 new coaches in terms of new positions overall, 5 new coaches that came from the outside. Bryn Renner, former North Carolina quarterback, switches over to coach the quarterbacks, is with the cornerbacks.
Okay.
And Brandon Harris returns to FIU. So 7 new position coaches overall.
Do you think that was just a coincidence as far as the timing, or was that done purposely?
The truth, again, is it's in the middle, right?
Okay.
Some of that is timing, but some of that also is, listen, you come off of 0-5, change can happen, right? Yeah. So
okay. And offensively, keep an eye. I've been told to keep an eye on this tight end, Fairweather. That it's nice to know that you led the team in receiving. Not nice for the team when it's 165 for a touchdown. But he's a tight end, and I'm hearing good things about him.
Okay, so yes, and I will come to Rivaldo in a second. The guy to keep an eye on is Devontae Price. I'm only going to outline Devontae because I talked about how just putrid the passing game was. Yet, he managed to finish second in Conference USA in yards per game, 116.2. There was a point, Greg, and again, as someone who covers this team, by week 2 or week 3, or game 2 or game 3, because FIU didn't play games consecutively, where you just knew they were going to load the box with 8-9 guys. Yeah. Yet, Devontae still managed to have 6 yards a pop. So it starts with Devontae. Then, yes, Rivaldo Fairweather is a guy they're very high on. Tight ends coach Drew Davis, son of Butch Davis, says that he's a guy who has all the athletic ability to be playing over at UM if, that had been the case. But Fairweather is one of those classic group of 5 stories, right? A kid who plays 1 year of high school football and is a raw talent. It's the FIU. It explodes. So offensively, yes, those would be the names to keep an eye on.
And what about the quarterback situation? Is this Bortenschlager coming back again, or are they going to have somebody to beat him out?
I jokingly, at FIU Media Day last week, yelled out to Bryn Renner, the quarterback's coach. I said, "Hey, Bryn, what you got on quarterbacks?" He's like, "When I know, you'll know."
Maybe that's good, though.
Listen, it's a 4-way competition, right? So Max Bortenschlager is the veteran returning from Maryland. He was coming off an off-season ankle surgery, and in the pandemic, never really got a chance to heal that properly. You got Kalyn Wiggins, is a dual threat, set the program record for most rushing yards by a quarterback in a game, 185, but still hasn't proven himself as a passer yet. The 2 guys to keep an eye on, Grayson James, a 3-star recruit out of Texas. And, of course, Texas quarterbacks, they certainly produce a lot of talent there in the high school level.
3-star, yeah.
Right. And then Hayden Carlson, son of former NFL quarterback Jeff Carlson, has all the physical tools. Butch Davis said, and this is his quote, not mine, 2 things. 1, had FIU continued to play more games last year, Hayden, as a true freshman, would have started 1 or 2, which goes to show you how high on is. And the second, and here's the eye-popping one, and I'm going to kind of say it in Coach Davis's, southern drawl. He kind of reminds you a little bit of that kid from Kansas City.
Oh.
That's his quote, not mine. So we all know who that kid from Kansas City is.
Start him.
Right?
Yeah. So if you start saying stuff like that, I think FIU fans, I think we know who they want to start.
Right. So it'll be a 4-way race to see how that kind of pans out. Just real quick, my kind of projection, I do believe Max Bortenschlager will start the year, but I honestly do think he'll be wide open.
All right. Next, in the East, Marshall, and no more Doc Holliday. How surprised were you when he was fired?
Can you be surprised when there's rumors that the governor wants you out?
If you know that, like you knew the information, then I guess not.
And I'll give you a hard time.
No, but that's the thing. It surprised us non-Conference USA experts. Wow, Doc Holliday has been there a long time. They've had a lot of success. I actually expected Doc Holliday one day to either find another job or he was going to leave. I didn't expect he was going to get fired.
Yeah, to bring your listeners up on that story, there was rumors, none of this was confirmed, that the former governor of West Virginia at the time, I believe his current governor, Jim Justice, wanted to replace him with somebody else. So if it's coming from that there, right, you can't be too shocked. Here's the thing. If you talk to Marshall fans, they believe, given the way Conference USA is constituted, and we'll talk about all the teams in this league as we're kind of doing so right now, Marshall's a blue blood. The Marshall, Southern Miss, Louisiana Techs, those are the blue bloods of CUSA for 3 decades now. And they believe that they should be winning the conference in comparison to the FAUs and FIUs and UTSA, schools that their programs are either less than 2 decades old or they were 1AA, or now I guess we say FCS, right?
Yes,
so
agreed.
That when you look at it in totality, there was feeling that Marshall underachieved. So I think that can kind of answer your question in that sense.
Okay. Well, kind of a lot to go on here. The new head coach is Charles Huff. Yeah. He's the first black head coach ever at Marshall. And when you come from Alabama as an assistant head coach, that opens your eyes. So what do you know, and what could you tell us about Charles Huff?
Had a chance to have Coach Huff on the CUSA podcast as well. He is a very unique personality. It is not going to be shocking that he coached under Nick Saban because he is very direct. He has a way that he wants things done. And by all means, I am a fan of Coach Huff. I think he's going to do a great job. He was considered to be one of the top recruiters in the nation at Alabama at the time. Wow. And just, kind of a thing on him, he's a native of the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, that kind of DMV area. So he wants to recruit that area. And that's a 4-hour radius from Marshall. So he has made a point that he wants to get the most out of that talent in that area and, compete with the rest of the schools in that region. So I think it's a good hire. I just think, and the reason why I'm kind of a little bit bullish on Marshall this year, A, they're playing a tougher schedule than they did last year. B, it's going to take a year or two for those guys that he wants to bring in to really kind of adopt that unique culture you bring from Alabama.
And that's a big culture change, no question.
Sure.
Especially when your former coach had been there like forever. Quarterback, Grant Wells, talented kid. It's good that it's a good way to come into a program when you've got a redshirt freshman quarterback at your disposal.
No doubt about it. And the thing, he's a local kid, and he's kind of a unique story as well, Greg, because when he was recruited there, the feeling, I believe he was a low 3-star, maybe high 2-star kid. The feeling was, all right, you got a hometown kid who gets a shot at his hometown school. Maybe as a senior, he'll get a chance to play. But then you lose the former quarterback there in Isaiah Green, and Grant Wells steps up, and he's the guy, and has an excellent 4 or 5 games, 6 games to start the year, but down the stretch really faltered, showed that true freshman, redshirt freshman kind of struggles. So can they get more out of him heading into year 2? That development's going to be key. But you have to like the fact that you have a good starting block there in Grant Wells.
I was going to ask you about that because that was one of the big mysteries around the nation. You got this Marshall team that's just killing everybody. And then and we'll get to Rice later, which I'm like a Rice believer under their head coach that we'll get into. So, but still, you're shocked when you see 20-0 and then they can't win a game. Is there a simple explanation of what in the world happened?
Wow. I don't know if a simple explanation. That Rice game was bewildering. 2 of those picks, and I don't know if you have the stats in front of you.
Well, I remember.
He threw 5 picks. 2 of them were tips, right? But still, the other 3 weren't exactly great. And Rice has a solid defense, but he struggled down the stretch, the Conference USA title game against UAB, which is a great defense as well. And I'm forgetting the other game they played as well, because with a 3-game stretch that they really struggled. It might have been the bowl game. It might have been the bowl game that he struggled as well. I don't know about a simple explanation outside of just the fact that, a young guy getting his first real competition or his first real playing time. And again, the level of competition did go up at the end of the year.
They lose running back Brendan Knox, who was a big workhorse for them the last couple of years. They do get back their number 1 receiver in Gamage. And we got to keep an eye on Xavier Gaines because he's a tight end with some pretty good numbers.
Xavier Gaines is the real deal. Former 4-star recruit as a quarterback, very athletic. Got to Marshall to move to tight end because he just has that type of athletic ability. He's a guy who you will see on Sundays. You could book that here.
And when he was a 4-star quarterback recruit, where was it? Was it here?
It was at Marshall. Yes. Okay. Yes. He was recruited as kind of one of those dual threat guys. You didn't know what happened, so that's why they switched him over.
Okay. They also lost, let's see, the number one tackler in Beckett and pass rusher, Darius Hodge. So a couple of losses there, but they have a very good secondary. Najee Johnson, he kind of leads that group, and also a good front seven. They've got Edwards at defensive tackle, and they've got a pair of pretty good linebackers. So this is a good defense.
Yeah, and for full disclosure, Greg, I lost the first part of your question, but I kind of got the gist of it, referring to the defense there. And the secondary is very strong. You mentioned Najee Johnson, Micah Abraham as well, a very solid CUSA cornerback. They have defensively. I mean, yes, you lose Tavante Beckett, right? And Tavante, pound for pound, one of the top players in CUSA. A middle linebacker at 5'11", $195, who's put over 100 tackles, right? So, a tough player there. But they have enough talent, again, to be in the mix. It's just really going to come down to what they get from quarterback play.
Okay. And by the way, it's his job, period, at quarterback.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah, undoubtedly.
Middle Tennessee, as we stay in the East. Speaking of coaches that have been there forever, Rick Stockstill. To me, it's just like another Doc Holliday. So, but Stockstill, surprisingly, just 2 games over 500. I thought he had a better record than that. But offensive line was considered one of the worst in all of FBS football last year. So we got to keep an eye on that. But they get the North Carolina State transfer, a quarterback, Bailey Hockman. So that's a big deal to get a transfer from NC State.
Yeah, Greg, and I'll go and hit your audience with a little nugget here, right? How much success can you have when the offensive coordinator is accusing the head coach of COVID sabotage?
Oh, that's not good.
For those of your listeners who don't know, just Google Tony Franklin, Rick Stockstill. It was the Washington Post wrote an entire deal about Tony Franklin. I don't want to mischaracterize his statement, but essentially saying that Rick Stockstill was not prioritizing the health of his staff and players. So if your offensive coordinator is not in sync in that regard, I don't think that's going to help your team on the field.
Wow, that's good information.
Yeah, and that's not me being hyperbolic. Again, Washington Post did a deep dive on it.
Sure.
Bring it back to the field. Huge offensive change. Yes, Coach Franklin is gone, but also Asher O'Hara, who was one of the top dual threat quarterbacks in the nation. He heads to FCS Sacramento State. You mentioned Bailey Hockman. When I asked Rick Stockstill at CUSA Media Days, kind of the shift in offensive philosophy, of course, he didn't get into any off the field stuff, but he mentioned that they needed more production out of their running backs. And the reason I say that is Asher O'Hara ran for 1,000 yards 2019, ran for 600 and something last year, 2020.
Yes.
But Greg, if you look at production from the running backs, they have not had a running back rush for more than 585 yards since 2016, Itavis Mathers. They had 2 years over the past 3 where their leading rusher from the running back position had less than 300 yards. So Rick Stockstill was adamant that they needed more production because they've recruited talented backs. And if you're just running the offense with the quarterback, that wasn't making the most of their players. Okay. They also have really talented receivers as well, and Jaron Pierce and Yusuf Ali.
Yes.
So keep an eye on those guys. Defensively, or really quick, you did mention the offensive line. That was a struggle. That absolutely was a struggle. And then defensively, Scott Schaefer's defense, the number of points they're allowing has just increased over the past 3 years. So that needs to change.
Okay. And they do return all 11 starters on defense. And DQ Thomas, 32 and a half tackles for loss over his last 3 years and 12 and a half sacks. So, by the way, the offensive coordinator you're talking about, it's his first year, right?
The new offensive coordinator, it is his first year. The former offensive coordinator, Tony Franklin, had worked for Rick Stockstill. A previous stop, I want to say he was there in 2011, 2012, then went out to the West Coast at Cal and came back to Middle Tennessee.
Okay. Old Dominion, again, did not play last year. Ricky Rahne, who was Penn State's offensive coordinator before he took the job at ODU in 2020, will finally get to coach on the sidelines this season, but only 10 returning starters, so they're very inexperienced, and that's because everybody with talent said, we're out of here. I mean, we're not sitting around waiting for 2021, and you don't blame them. So it's probably going to be at least a couple of years before they get things rolling there, huh?
Yeah, and what really hurt them, remember, they went 1-11 in 2019, but Greg, how many 1-11 teams get 2 guys plucked off by Power Fives?
True.
Caleb Ford Dement went to UCLA and now with Liberty. and Keon White, defensive end, landed at Georgia Tech. So it goes to show they had some talent on that roster, but damn, the little talent they had it just got plucked up by the Power Five. Here's going to be the deal for Ricky Rahne. Offensively, he's trying to establish a quarterback, right? So they have Hayden Wolf, who is a traditional pocket passer. He started the 3 out of the final 4 games as a true freshman in 2019. Got a chance to see his first start. I told you that'd be a recurring theme when they played against FIU at home or on the road, excuse me. And he looks solid. Now, the thing is, he's a traditional pocket passer. He's going to look back there and sling it. They had a game against Middle Tennessee that I think he threw the ball 63 times in his second career start. Insert for Ricky Rahne, the UCF transfer DJ Mack. And he's a guy who's a classic dual threat, hometown kid from Norfolk, was the MVP of the AAC title game in 2019 when UCF defeated Memphis, ran for 4 touchdowns.
I remember that.
Threw for 2 more, right?
Okay.
So you got that conundrum. Do we go with the pocket guy who apparently has improved athletically, according to Ricky Rahne in Media Day, or do you go with the traditional dual threat guy, right? So that'll have to play out there. Outside of that, like you mentioned, not a ton of talent that's really left over. 2 guys to keep an eye on. Jordan Young's probably their top defensive player. Isaac Weaver is going to be a 6th-year senior, if memory serves me correct, at offensive line. He started for the past 3 years. But it's going to be a work in progress. And you got to think, if they can just get 3 or 4 wins, that's progress to where they were.
Yeah, especially, again, like you said, 1 win, didn't play. Absolutely. And they got time. And you see, I learned something new already, and that is how to pronounce Ricky Rahne's last name. That's because he wasn't on the sidelines last year.
Right.
Okay, Western Kentucky wraps up the East. Tyson Helton, Coach of the Year in 2019 in his first year. This is his 3rd year. So not very good in year 2 after a successful 2019. Only 10 returning starters this year. But they've got these Houston Baptist FCS transfers coming in, including the quarterback. So what could you tell us about these transfers, including the quarterback?
Let's get right to Bailey Zappe. I'm all on the Bailey Zappe hype train. You're talking about
Bailey Zappe.
Bailey Zappe.
All right.
One of the most prolific passers in the nation, if you take out by conference or division. Threw for over 10,000 yards in 3 years at Houston Baptist. And you got to remember, one of the things that gives Western Kentucky fans confidence, they played 5 CUSA opponents in the past 2 years at Houston Baptist and pushed them really well.
Okay.
So you got to think, you level up his talent around him, right? He's now playing with all FBS players. And they bring in not only his 2 top receivers in the Stearns twins, but they bring in his offensive coordinator from Houston Baptist as well.
Okay.
So when Tyson Helton has bought all in on Bailey Zappe, he's all in, okay? And to the point where Bailey Zappe was named the starter 2 days after fall camp started. So there was no mystery about what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's going to be the air raid. Zach Kitley, former Houston Baptist offensive coordinators from the Texas Tech tree. If you know anything about that offense, that's what you can expect from them. Defensively, we're going to have to see they return DeAngelo Malone. DeAngelo Malone, you will see on Sundays. He's another one of those Conference USA standout defensive ends. But outside of that, they did lose some really solid pieces. So we'll have to see what they can do as far as stopping teams. But again, I got to give Tyson Helton credit. If you're going to go all in on a quarterback, and I'm very passionate about this, Greg, don't try to get a quarterback and say you got to play my system.
And by the way, Malone, 25 career sacks, 42.5 career tackles for loss. Also keep an eye on safety Antoine Kincaid.
Yeah.
That's the East. Now, let's get to the West, and we're going to start with Louisiana Tech. And Skip Holtz at Louisiana Tech. Worst year under Holtz last year. So if you're going to have a bad year, you figure it's going to be what happened last year. So, and everybody's going to forgive Skip Holtz for having a bad year. But there's still some potential issues heading into this season. And that starts at quarterback. Will Luke Anthony be the quarterback or Aaron Allen?
Well, it is actually a 3rd guy, West Virginia transfer Austin Kendall, who just got there. And the only reason I bring him up, Greg, is because Luke Anthony, who you mentioned, if he hadn't have suffered a gruesome broken ankle/leg at the last game of the year against TCU, or the last regular season game, it's probably Luke Anthony's job, right? But there was a huge question mark as to whether he was going to be healthy in time for spring and fall.
Okay.
By all accounts, he's been super healthy. His rehab has gone really well, and he's going to be there ready to go potentially week 1. So will it be Luke Anthony? Will it be Aaron Allen? Will it be Austin Kendall, former four-star kid, started his career at Oklahoma, then went to West Virginia? Got some significant playing time at West Virginia. We'll see. But if Luke Anthony can be what he was last year and is fully healthy, that'll help him at quarterback.
Okay. And also, let's see. I did some research. They've had a new leading rusher for the last 5 years since Kenneth Dixon left. And that's going to happen again with Tucker gone. Hardy's gone, and he had a productive career there. Smoke Harris, he's a name that I think we should keep an eye on, correct?
Yeah, so I'll hit with the running backs really quick. Marcus Williams Jr. from App State, that's the guy to keep an eye on. He should be that new leading rusher this year. But Smoke Harris, Griffin Hebert, got to have a little Louisiana there, Hebert, right? Those are the two guys. Those are the two guys at receiver to keep an eye on. Those smaller kind of diminutive type of receivers, Smoke Harris, I believe, was 5'7", 5'8". Griffin Hebert about 5'9", 5'10". But they know how to get open. And in their offense, where they've had, again, Adrian Hardy, they've had Isaiah Graham, Smoke Harris, Griffin Hebert. Those guys, C.J. Powell, those guys will have a good chance. They're veteran receivers who know how to get open and make plays. And
the linebacking unit is really strong. You've got Grubbs, who was a freshman who led the team in tackles. You got Baldwin, and you got Barnett. That's a really good threesome at linebacker. And they also have a pretty good safety in B.J. Williamson.
Absolutely. Tyler Grubbs was a heck of a player, especially for being a freshman. And then I think after that, you want to take a look at B.J. Williamson because La Tech, they've put guys in the NFL the past few years. When you look at Eljarius Sneed, you look at, I'm blanking the name of Amik Robertson. There we go. Amik Robertson.
I like Sneed. I'm a big Sneed fan.
But both of those guys, selected in the same NFL draft, and B.J. Williamson has a chance to be the next guy.
Okay. Next up is North Texas. It felt it was just yesterday that Seth Luttrell was like one of these hot group of 5 head coach names. And maybe he should have left when he had the chance. I don't know. But 19 returning starters this year. So they're going to, offensively, they're going to do just fine, even though they lost Darden, which is a big blow to their receiving unit. And they also lost their top corner to transfer, Cam Johnson. But they do bring in a new defensive coordinator, former SMU coach Phil Bennett, and they really need to shore up that defense.
You have to start with the defense. If you know anything about North Texas football, they're going to score points. They have ever since Seth Luttrell got there. 3rd defensive coordinator in 3 years.
Wow.
Phil Bennett, it was Clint Bowen, I believe the year prior, and I'm forgetting who it was in 2018. But here's the deal. They allowed over 40 points per game last year. That's not going to cut it in any league. And what's so surprising, Greg, is they have talented guys on defense. Defensive tackle Dion Novil, another guy to keep an eye on if you're, an NFL football fan. Yeah. He's going to be that old school nose tackle, that Haloti Ngata type, can absolutely stuff the run. And then they have Katie Davis, who's a very solid linebacker as well. So it's just surprising that they haven't performed well defensively, but it really starts and stops there. And then to quickly hit on the offense, you mentioned Jalen Darden, now the Tampa Bay Bucks, one of the top wideouts in all of college football last year. They have guys like Deontay Simpson and Greg Pirtle and all these guys who will return. They're going to be able to put points on the board, but keep an eye on the running game this year. I think they're going to go a little bit more running back heavy with the quarterback competition being, I don't want to say unstable, but still up in the air between Austin Ani, former New York Yankees third baseman, or minor leaguer, I should say, third baseman, and North Carolina transfer Jace Ruder. Oscar Adaway III and DeAndre Torrey are going to be the running backs, and they both are very talented as well.
Yeah, Torrey had 656 on the ground and 6 touchdowns last year. All right, we're going to stick in the West, and let's see. I've got paperwork all over the place. So let's tell you what. Let's go next. I think alphabetically I'm hitting it right, and that is Rice. So let's go with Rice. And as I said before, I've been following Rice a little bit since Bloomgren became their head coach because I just thought that was a really good hire. You get a Stanford guy to go to Rice, makes a lot of sense. And then they had the big win against Marshall, and I'm like, okay, they've got something going. They lost all 3 of their games by only 21 points last year. So it shows, and they only played 5 games. And look, he's only 7-23 in his 3 years. That doesn't matter. I am concerned with the loss of Mike Collins. There's no question about that. They bring in McCaffrey, who's more of a runner. So that's the battle, McCaffrey and Giovanni Johnson at quarterback. How do you think that's going to shake out?
Greg, it is all about, you mentioned that 7-23 record. That team, and I know it sounds so cliche, right? Because, I could hear Butch Davis would tell me this now if I mentioned this to him. You are what your record is, right?
Sure.
And then he'd go into some story about his years under Jimmy Johnson and all that. But they're a better team than the 7-23. They just haven't had quarterback play. They get out of Mike Collins last year, and unfortunately, he has to medically retire. The seemingly has some concussion issues. So you talk about the guys. Is it going to be Giovanni Johnson? Is it going to be Wiley Green? Is it going to be almost said Christian McCaffrey? His brother, Luke McCaffrey, right? By all accounts, I think it's going to be Luke McCaffrey because he has the highest ceiling of any of those guys. But quick story here to kind of summarize Rice's quarterback issues. I sent out a tweet last offseason saying that they're going to get Bradley Rosner, their top receiver, back. Yes. They had Austin Trammell, who was a very good receiver at Rice. I sent out a tweet saying, hey, if Rice had better quarterback play, both of these guys would be 1,000-yard receivers. Who was one of the people to like that tweet? Mike Bloomgren. So that should show you
that, Mike who?
Mike Bloomgren.
Okay.
So that just goes to show you that he agrees that, hey, if we get better quarterback play, we'll be all right.
Yeah, and also Jake Bailey and tight end Jordan Myers. So the weapons are there.
Both those guys are very good players as well, by the way.
Yes, the weapons are there. Defensively, their top player may be Braylon Carroll up front, and they got 19 returning starters. Watch out for Rice. They could be a surprise this year.
No doubt about it. Really quick, they lose Blaze Aldridge, one of the top linebackers in CUSA, to Missouri. A guy to keep an eye on. Trayshawn Chamberlain, pound for pound, one of the top players in CUSA. 5'9", $185, but he's going to play that star position, kind of safety middle line or safety outside linebacker. Very good player for Rice.
Will Hall, first year, offensive coordinator. He'll have the title for the team as well because he was the offensive coordinator with Tulane.
Correct.
He has Division II head coaching experience. He was pretty good at West Georgia, West Alabama. But again, it's up to quarterbacks, as it is with a lot of these schools. It gets the West Virginia transfer, Trey Lowe. So that's going to be really important because they lose Jack Abraham after 3 years starting there.
Yeah. And here's the thing, right? So that team was in turmoil because they had 3 head coaches last year. 3 guys actually held the title. Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah. Mentioned Jack Abraham. He opted out midway through the year. And you mentioned the fact that they get Trey Lowe. This is Trey Lowe's first year where he's not splitting his time between baseball and football.
Okay.
He gets a first full offseason as a quarterback. And we got to mention, listen, Greg, I know, anyone who you mentioned you're a Jet guy, former Jet, Frank Gore, the son of Gore. Frank Gore Jr. is there at Southern Miss, looks just like his dad, doesn't wear the gloves, 5'8", 5'9", 210. He is a marvel to watch because he looks just like his dad there at running back. He's going to, kind of tote the rock for them offensively. And then Jason Brownlee, who's a JUCO All-American, really had a nice year last year, averaged over 19 yards per catch. So the reason I mentioned last year in terms of some of the turmoil, despite all of that, 3 of their losses came by less than a touchdown.
Okay.
So if they can get that turned around and turn those to a couple wins, they may be a dark horse competitor in CUSA West.
Yeah, and again, that's probably where it starts then, at quarterback. If they can get the quarterback play, hopefully they're successful under Gore because, you get the feeling, a player like Gore, who knows? Maybe he plays another year, maybe 2, and he might say, if I either decide to go to the pros or he could transfer to another program. You never know. So while you have a guy that talented, you got to take advantage of it. That's really what I was trying to say. The defense should be better. The linebackers are good. They got that Latham kid.
Yeah.
And they also have Booth coming back after he opted out in 2020, and Hayes Maples. Is back too.
Yeah, the defense should be improved, and just kind of piggyback off your Frank Gore point. What would life be if you weren't talking about a Frank Gore in the NFL, right?
Wow.
Let's get him to the league.
That's a lifetime for a 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid. That's
exactly.
Nuts. All right, now it's time for the defending CUSA champs, UAB, and one of my favorite head coaches in college football, Bill Clark, because every year around the coaching carousel time, nobody ever talks about Bill Clark. And I'm like, how can all these names are going around and nobody ever talks about Bill Clark? I mean, I don't understand it. He has done a phenomenal job with this program. I'm just shocked, but hey, good for UAB. They get to keep Bill Clark there. Tyler Johnston. He's erratic, but he's talented and he's experienced. And if he could have a really good year, they could have a really, really good year because they have a great defense. And they lost a couple of key players too, of course, including Jordan Smith. But they have a really good defense, and they got the new stadium. So I don't see any reason why they won't repeat.
Quick note on Tyler Johnson. Quick note to your Bill Clark point. I think the reason that they haven't lost Bill Clark is because you just mentioned the stadium. One of the best things to happen to this program, Greg, was them getting shut down, because then once they got it back, the people who are UAB alumni really invested in building them a top-notch stadium.
They don't want to lose them again. Yeah.
Top-notch practice facility. And if you're Bill Clark, why am I in a rush when I've won the league 2 out of my 4 years to go take a P5 job at Kansas and I get fired in 3 years? Or I've got the best facilities in CUSA here. So that's the Bill Clark deal. Tyler Johnson, you mentioned him being erratic. I want to point out that I believe the combination of Tyler Johnston and offensive coordinator Bryant Vincent is the most crucial in this league. Here's why. Tyler Johnson, 35 touchdowns, 25 interceptions over his career. Yards per attempt, over 9, which means, in layman's terms, they're pushing the ball downfield. Why is that so important? They've had great rushing production over the past 3 years.
Yeah.
So they ended up in second and short and third and short, and it's still boom or bust in the passing game. Well, yes, TJ3 probably needs to protect the ball a little bit more. Maybe some of that's play calling. We don't need to push the ball downfield a little bit. Just give our quarterback a little bit of easy throws, right? So I think they're crucial, and you hit the nail on the head. Defensively, even though they lost Jordan Smith and other guys, they have the talent. So if quarterback is more consistent, it's UAB's league to lose, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's some of the top guys I noticed. You have Damon Miller in the secondary. You also have Dijon Turner in the secondary, TD Marshall. Up front, you got Alex Wright, Tyree Turner. Linebackers, Noah Wilder, Christopher Mole. I mean, they're loaded. So what's their schedule? Do they get, like, they usually have like a good Power 5 team or two to compete with. I'd like to see if they have like a winnable game.
You know what? I should know this off the top of my head. They have a P5 that's going to be a tough game from this year. Last year they had Miami, and I picked them to win. Unfortunately, they didn't. But they have a Power 5 this year. And is it Georgia?
Scary.
Is it? I think maybe Georgia. You know what? It is Georgia, I believe. Yeah. And that obviously is going to be a tough ask. So
that ain't going to work. Yeah, that's a little bit. I don't mind. It's gutsy. No question. And if you win one of those games, wow, like Appalachian State, Michigan, but maybe dial it down a little bit with those Power 5 opponents. Okay, a couple more teams to go. We'll go with UTSA.
Sure.
And wow, Jeff Traylor, year one, brings into a second bowl game ever. It's interesting because they were like middling around, not taking advantage maybe the way they should in Texas, fertile recruiting ground and all that. But all of a sudden, in 1 year that Jeff Traylor's there, not only do they go to a bowl, but they're just flooded with talent. This is a talented football team.
Well, the thing that's interesting about UTSA, Greg, is for all of Frank Wilson, the former head coach's faults, he was one of the top recruiters when he came from LSU.
Yes.
Yeah, because the talent was there. And Jeff Traylor just managed to get a healthy Frank Harris, who had missed both of the last 2 prior years with season-ending injuries. Sincere McCormick, for your fans or your listeners, one of the top running backs in the nation. Finished second or third in all FBS football in rushing yards last year?
1467 and 11 touchdowns.
And then defensively, they are loaded. Rashad Wisdom is the name to keep an eye on, one of the top safeties in all of the nation. I mean, they return an all-conference performer on special teams and punter Lucas Dean, and on defense and Rashad Wisdom, and on offense, so in Sincere McCormick. So they have the chance. If anyone's going to upset or unseed UAB, it's UTSA.
I could see that. And also the Ole Miss transfer broke out last year, Charles Wiley.
Yes.
And he's back. And Spencer Buford leads the offensive line at left tackle. Really good. And they have one of the best pair of receivers in the conference with Franklin and Cephas.
Yes. No doubt.
All right, and then we wrap it up with UTEP, Dana Dimmel. You think that's it? One more year for Dana Dimmel, 5-27, year 4. They do have 19 returning starters, 1-27 in conference play since 2017. You think he gets one more year?
UTEP AD Jim Center said this offseason that we're just not there yet when it comes to an extension for Dana Dimmel. That's obviously not a vote of confidence, huh, Greg? I don't know if either of us want that at our day job, right? Here's the deal. it's so tough to assess UTEP because it wasn't like they've been a doormat for 20 years. You go back half a decade ago, and they were making bowl games.
Yeah.
Whatever
That's when
happened,
Price was the head coach.
exactly. Whatever happened between the Sean Kugler era and now Dana Dimmel, the cupboard was really bare, and he's gone, he being Dana Dimmel, has gone very JUCO heavy. So even in trying to replenish quickly, you're losing guys after 1 or 2 years because of JUCO, right?
Yep.
This year is crucial. They have talent. A couple guys I want to name. Jacob Cowing, Justin Garrett, a pair of really good Conference USA receivers. They have the leading rusher in the history of El Paso high school football, Dion Hankins, who had a really good redshirt freshman year last year.
Okay.
Gonna come down to quarterback, Gavin Hardison. He was a guy who was pedestrian last year, 5 touchdowns, 5 picks, if memory serves me correct. If they can get him to the next level, and they also bring in 2 new coordinators, offense and defense, if they can get more out of quarterback position, I've asked UTEP fans this: what number for this year gives you confidence that you want to bring Dan Dimmel back? Because when 3 wins gives you more wins than you had in the past 2 years combined, is it 4 wins? Is it 5 wins? Is it a bowl game? I don't know, but they just have to show improvement.
You know, it's probably just the improvement, but you better make sure you have at least 4 wins. You got to be competitive with 4 wins.
Absolutely agree, without a doubt.
Before I ask you the prediction questions, so trivia question, and you should know this. Speaking of UTEP, under Kugler, the only player to come out of the Kugler era that's doing anything in the NFL.
Oh, very easy. Will Hernandez.
Oh, well, Will Hernandez too. You see, I was thinking of someone else. That's a good one. I wasn't even thinking of Will Hernandez. I should have thought about him. Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones. Come on. How did I miss that?
See, you missed Aaron Jones. I missed Will Hernandez. All right. So let's now get to your predictions here. Well, first I want to ask you, is there a clear-cut top prospect or 2 in the conference? Somebody that just, this guy definitely.
Listeners who are familiar with Conference USA or my work may call me a homer for this, but Devontae Price from FIU has been getting rave reviews. Just had Jim Nagy, the head of the Senior Bowl, invite him to the Senior Bowl watch list.
Okay.
That's a guy to keep an eye on that I think is clear cut. And it's one of those things, Greg, where Sincere McCormick is the best running back in the league. I love Devontae. I just talked to him last week. He thinks he's the best, but what player's going to say he's not, right? But when you project to the next level, Devontae is projecting to the next level a top prospect. So him offensively and defensively, DeAngelo Malone. I mean, Malone's a guy who I was shocked that he was going to take advantage of the additional year with, COVID and whatnot, because he could have left last year. He was Defensive Player of the Year in 2019. Could have repeated last year, but, got double teamed and triple teamed. And of course, they didn't play a full 12, 13 game slate. So Malone is easily the defensive guy.
Okay. All right. Who are you picking to win it all? Give me the championship game.
I have to stick with the vote that I submitted for my media poll. That's going to be Florida Atlantic out of the East and UTSA out of the West. And I am buying high on the Roadrunners. I think this is the year they put it all together and they win the conference.
All right. I like it. Player of the year.
Player of the year, I believe my vote, memory serves correct. I know offensive player of the year, I had Sincere McCormick. Player of the year, I believe I had Sincere McCormick as well, because now CUSA does it. They do player of the year as an offensive and.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I believe I had Sincere McCormick for both offensive and overall MVP.
And okay. And then was the defensive pick the same, Malone?
Malone, yes.
On defense? Okay.
Yeah.
And did you have a head coach of the year?
You know what? Because we don't choose that. That's chosen by the league. But if you put me on the spot and ask me to choose, I'm thinking. You know what? That's
Trailer?
That's been the Bill Clark Award for a while.
Yeah.
I'm thinking either Jeff Traylor or if Western Kentucky can hit on that offensive switch, Tyson Helm.
Okay. And I'll go with Mike Blomgren. If Rice can get things going down there. I think he's going to hit sooner or later. I don't know how long it's going to take, but he'll get it. Great job, Eric. I appreciate it. You've got your podcast now for anybody out there that wants to check in on a weekly basis. Is it once a week?
Yes, a weekly podcast.
SBNation.com, or just go to the Underdog Dynasty website?
Well, you can find it a myriad of ways. You can find it on SB Nation. Just click on podcast. It'll drop down to the link, and you'll find our college football podcast. Go to UnderdogDynasty.com. You'll find the podcast there as well. And find me on Twitter at EricCHenry_, and you can find the link for pod and everything else there as well.
Terrific. Eric, appreciate it. As soon as there's some big news or some big game, or, if UAB upsets Georgia, you'll be the first I call.
No doubt about it. And hey, if James Morgan gets a start this year, you know where to find me.
I'll be calling you on that as well. Thanks, Eric.
No problem, Greg. Appreciate it.